Welcome to the Jericho Force podcast, where we learn how to integrate faith into the work that we do. Don't conform to the world's way of doing business. Transform by doing business God's way. Here's our host, my husband, author, speaker, teacher, encourager, and stewardship coach, Jason Davis.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Jason Davis, aka Mr. Fortify, and welcome to the Jericho Force podcast, where we talk about how we integrate faith into the work that we do and how we live out our faith in the marketplace. I am really excited about our episode today. We've got a dynamic guest. She is a powerhouse, especially in the area of media, but there's even more than that she's involved in. But before I introduce her to you, let me tell you a little bit more about her and the impact that she's making in the marketplace. Lillie Mae, as an award-winning PR strategist and creator of the Glambitious brand, Lillie Mae has dedicated her efforts to empowering, recognizing, and supporting entrepreneurs of all facets around the country for 10 plus years. Having grown up in a very underserved community, her desire to reverse the poverty, gun violence, and drug use in the neighborhood compelled her to become the first college graduate in her family from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She has since built the internationally recognized Glambitious platform to encourage entrepreneurship as a tool to break generational deficits and accelerate financial freedom. She now offers courses, coaching, and books at the GlamCEO.com to activate entrepreneurs into their next level. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Jericho Force podcast, Lillie Mae.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me. Excited to chat.
Absolutely. Lillie Mae, it's been a long time coming. We met through our interactions through KBN, the Kingdom Business Network. Shout out to KBN. But I'm excited because we get to sit down and have a whole other conversation, just getting to know one another. And it's all about you today.
Absolutely. I love it.
Well, Lillie Mae, let's go ahead and get into it. We know that your bio has a lot in there, and you have been graced to do so many different things, and we'll get back to that later. But Lillie Mae, where you find yourself today, tell us about the background. Take us on a journey. In 2022, you are where you are by the grace of God, but we know that you haven't always been there. So give us a peek into your professional background.
Sure. So when I was a student at UNC Chapel Hill, go Tar Heels, I was studying communications, and then I had a professor that just really, she liked me a lot. And so she got me an internship in New York at Universal Motown Records in their public relations department. So that was my first introduction to public relations. I moved to New York for the summer at 21. And I worked in the public relations department of Universal Motown Records. It was so exciting. They had like Erykah Badu on the label, Joe, Juvenile, all these amazing people. And again, keep in mind, this was almost 20 years ago. So I was like, public relations is definitely what I want to do because this is a load of fun. And then I had, a few other PR internships while in college, finished my major, moved to Atlanta after college. And my first job I got laid off of, and I continued to get laid off like back to back to back. I don't know what was going on in the job market back then.
Oh, no.
But that inspired me to start my own business because I was like, okay, enough is enough, and I started my first business, which was an independent magazine. And then after that, I started my PR agency, and it just kind of, took a life of its own and, really propelled me forward in so many different areas. And so, yeah, that's kind of, I guess, and I can't fail to mention, during that time, as I was, really doing well in public relations, I had a client who was a celebrity chef, and he opened a new lounge. And he said, Lillie, I want to hire you to get people, to come visit my lounge. So I started hosting these women empowerment events to get influencers and celebrities into that lounge. And that created the Glambitious network, which I have since grown to about 44,000 ladies on Instagram. But that's how that got started. And I just wanted to, have a place for women to empower each other in entrepreneurship. So that's kind of, I guess, the long story short of my journey.
Lillie Mae, that is awesome. From Motown Records to having a magazine to starting a PR agency and then hosting events for celebrities. That is quite the story, Lillie Mae, and one that a lot of people don't get a chance to live. So let me ask you, as you were talking, you got a chance to experience a lot of different domains. What were some of the key takeaways you learned before starting your own thing, working for a record label and then having a magazine? What were some of your some of those key lessons that you've never really that you continue to implement that have a great impact where you are today?
Yeah, well, I would definitely say, like during my internship at Universal Motown, I learned a lot. I learned the number one thing I learned was to treat everybody with respect, whether it's the celebrity, whether it's the junior publicist, whether it's the, main PR, whoever you're encountering, because you never know where they're going to be in the next phase of their career. And so that was something I took with me where, whether I don't care if you're the janitor or the CEO, I'm going to treat you with a high level of respect. And that allowed me to have a lot of longevity in entrepreneurship, because the people who are like at entry level and they meet me and I might be at an upper level, they come, to an upper level at some point. And they're like, Lillie treated me well when nobody cared about me. Nobody knew my name. And so in Atlanta, you just never know who's going to be who. And that helped me definitely with longevity, is treating everyone with respect. I know sometimes, people tend to favor people that have the money or make the decisions or have the notoriety. I treat everyone just like God gives all of us a measure of grace and favor. I'm the same way in business. I don't care if you're the assistant or the president. I'm giving everyone utmost respect. So that was probably one of the biggest takeaways. And the second takeaway was to be very resourceful, because during my internship, there were things they were asking me to do that I did not know how to do. But I became resourceful to figure it out without asking questions. And by doing that, they always wanted to take me along on these like amazing moments. For example, quick story. If you remember Manny Fresh, which I know you do because it's from our generation.
Yes, sir.
It was a crazy time where the publicist I was working under had to escort him to Sony Records back then. And so she was like, Lillie, why don't you come ride with us? And I'm 21, like, Manny Fresh, and 20 years ago he was popping. And so because I was resourceful and I got my work done in excellence and I wasn't starstruck and I treated everyone with respect, the publicist would take me along on some fantastic voyages. So that, being resourceful and treating everyone with respect are two takeaways I would say from that internship experience for sure.
I love that, Lillie Mae, because respecting everyone, to your point, you just never know how that'll come back. And listeners, as you're hearing Lillie Mae talk about what she's learned, that's a principle. It doesn't matter what industry that you're in, whether it's blue collar, white collar, entertainment, media, education, because people remember how you treated them and how you made them feel. So I love how you said that, respect everyone, and it leads to longevity. Lillie Mae, and especially within our age group, some people have a tendency to go in and out of different types of businesses or jobs. So I think one lesson that we can take away from your story, as well as others, is, hey, it's possible to be in something for the long game, but you've in the long run, but you got to treat everybody right, because we know scripture, sowing and reaping, it's very real. The other thing you mentioned about being resourceful, two subcategories of being resourceful I got was problem solving and critical thinking, and also the ability to think on your feet. You were in a fast paced environment. So, hey, Lillie Mae, can you, and you were also, now that I think about it, being flexible and adaptable. And again, these are problem solving, critical thinking, being adaptable, that applies to so many different things today. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yes, absolutely. That adaptability, entrepreneurship for most people is not just one straight path. Mm-hmm. It's roller coasters, it's ups, downs, and that adaptability is so important for longevity for sure.
Wow. Lillie Mae, can you talk to me about an example of a difficulty you had to overcome, whether moving from the record label to your magazine? What was a lesson that you kind of learned the hard way that you appreciate now, but maybe when you were going through it, you're like, this is terrible, or maybe I made a mistake? Well, what mistake can you talk about that you really learned from that has brought you to where you are today?
So I could think of a lot of challenges. Now, let me think of a mistake, though. Mm-hmm. What is a mistake that I made? Well, I will say as far as a significant challenge, as you mentioned, I also host events. And so I've hosted events from New York to Philly, DC, Miami, Charlotte, Atlanta, all different types of places and sizes of events I've hosted. So I thought I was really good at it, right? And then when 2020 came, I had this huge event planned in Atlanta. There were hundreds of people that were signed up to come. There were thousands of dollars invested, sponsors, vendors, the whole gamut. And then because of COVID, they shut the venue down that I was going to have my event at, 2 days before the day I was going to have my event. And it was immensely stressful to me because I had so, much invested. Like, I've been preparing for that event. People were flying in, text messages were blowing up. And so I think the thing that I learned from that was to prepare for the unexpected, by having a reservoir of money just for the unexpected, separate from your business account, your personal account, your savings, your retirement. Separate from that, we often have an emergency fund for personal life emergencies, but I think we need a business emergency fund because that became a significant emergency. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? Fortunately, things worked themselves out to where, everyone got their refunds and things like that. But it taught me man, you really never know as an entrepreneur what could happen that you can't even fathom. And so it's good to have a business emergency fund separate from all of your other accounts in case the unexpected happens in your business, you can still survive.
I like that, Lillie Mae. Expect the unexpected. And I feel like these last 2.5 years, a lot of people learn that lesson in real time. Hey, I'm going to, we came into the Q1 2020 and all of a sudden, about March 12th, March 13th hit and it was complete shutdown. And then things got more locked down. And so there was all types of cancellations in the, conferences and events and live appearances. And so you're right, that financial stewardship aspect, it applies in the good times and the plentiful times. And then also when things are a little bit tough. And now we're going into a different phase as, inflation is rising. And so that's a big one. Prepare for the unexpected, expect the unexpected. And we even see elements of planning in scripture about the wisdom associated with that. So thank you for sharing. And I like too that the word challenge, there's certainly all of us have made mistakes, but if we look at them as opportunities to learn, I think that's critical. And you certainly did. And you sharing yours. And I know it's hard to talk about the challenges. We also know in the word, it talks about that we overcome by the word of our testimony. So people can learn from the different things we walk through. So I love that, Lillie Mae. And what would you say now? You had me thinking about something as events are kind of coming back, Lillie Mae, based on what you've seen. Do you have any recommendations for people putting on events, kind of getting back into it, putting on conferences, events, live programming? What are you kind of taking into this new dispensation of doing business now that in-person's returning?
Yeah, I would say, if you're planning to do an in-person event, maybe consider also making it hybrid, because there still are a lot of people not comfortable with that yet. So if you make it a hybrid event, people can still pay for online access to watch the event as well. And then I would also say to definitely take, proper precautions. Like, I would encourage people still enforce everyone to wear a mask and things like that. I know that it's not like a national mandate in most cities and states right now to wear a mask, but I would highly encourage that just to keep your guests safe. I've had so many people ask me, like, when are you going to have your next big conference? And, I'm just personally not comfortable yet, doing a big event in person, because, I'm so concerned with the safety of my guests. That is such a priority to me, that I'm not comfortable yet. But if you're going to do it, definitely just have proper precautions, like the social distancing, where seats are apart, have certain things in place with your vendors. So if there is a reason you have to reschedule or cancel, there's no penalty. So you want to make sure that's negotiated in your contracts, which now most vendors are very flexible, having went through the 2020, so you just want to make sure those things, like your venue contracts, are very flexible in case something should happen. Those would be kind of the tips I would say for people hosting in-person events.
Love it. Love it. Lillie Mae, you're dropping some gems today. You're dropping some major gems. But Lillie Mae, as we shift gears a little bit here, we all know as kingdom business owners, as people that God has called for a specific purpose in the marketplace, our personal testimonies play a large factor into where we are today. So for you, what was that big turning point in your faith journey that really shaped who you are today?
Yeah, I would say one of probably several turning points was definitely at the end of 2020. I very unexpectedly had an eye stroke. And that's very unusual for my age. Really, very, very older people tend to have that. And so because it's so unusual, I had to go through a lot of testing and poking and prodding, literally with needles. Like, they were really trying to figure out, almost like I was like a little science rabbit, why that happened and what caused it, and get to the bottom of it. And it was, we all know 2020 was already, a mess. And so you add that on top of me being like a single person and having to kind of somewhat go through that alone. That definitely was the turning point for me, because I was so worried about my vision, and those things I was worried, at every doctor's visit. And it's like I had to build a stronger relationship with God. And I realized in that prior to that, because I grew up in church and I've always gone to church, prior to that, I was a Christian out of activity, not out of relationship. And what I mean is, yes, I woke up and went to church on Sunday. Yes, I said my grace. Yes, I prayed before I went to sleep. But I really didn't have a relationship with God. Like, now I talk to God. I incorporate him in my business, my personal life. When I feel anxiety creeping up, I talk to him right then. The Holy Spirit, like all of these facets of God that are accessible to us. I feel like I intentionally try to access that through building relationship, like learning what it is to really be at home alone and worship God. Like, I used to just go to church to worship on Sundays. I didn't have a praise break in the house. And so that very scary situation in 2020, it really pivoted me. And that was right around the time that Clubhouse started. And so then, I fell into the KBN rooms, which are such a blessing to me as well. Such a blessing KBN is to so many of us. And then I was inspired to start my own devotional that I host Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday on Clubhouse. And just overall, I feel like it changed me a lot. I feel like I developed a spiritual maturity, an actual, like I said, relationship. It was very pivotal, for sure, in my faith walk.
That's huge, Lillie Mae. And I feel like I've had a lot of conversations with people over the last 2 years, and I've heard that a lot, even thinking about different things that, me and my family have walked through. There was a maturing. Certainly there was economic uncertainty, racial and social injustice, and the pandemic. But I've heard, kind of like what you're saying, Lillie Mae, I've heard a lot of people say, man, I grew closer to God. I thought it was about rules and activity, and now it's relationship. They're actually walking with God. They have a spiritual intimacy and a maturity. Like you said, you could be in the, I call it from the boardroom to the bathroom. Jesus is with you.
Right. Right.
So that's paramount, what you're talking about. And I think when we're really with all the negative in the media, it's easy to take our mind off of what God has actually done through the pandemic. So I appreciate you sharing that aspect of it and growing closer to the Lord. My goodness. Lillie Mae, as you've gotten closer, you mentioned things like, when I feel anxiety, I'm praying right there in the moment. Do you have any advice for other faith-based business owners about how to just invite Jesus into the business context? Any advice you have for them?
Sure. I would definitely encourage them to join the KBN club and do the prophetic journaling every morning at 8 a.m. because that was a very significant start for me. Just doing that activity with KBN in the, prophetic planning room every morning, I think it's 8 a.m. Eastern. That really helped me a lot to learn how to really trust the voice of God, because sometimes for many of us, the voice of God sounds like our own voice. And we're like, wait a minute, am I just thinking that, or is that the voice of God? And, they say during that prophetic journaling that we are to trust what we hear in response is God. And a big part of hearing God's voice is to trust that it's his voice, like trust the sound of his voice, however that appears to you. For some people, it might be a vision, a gumption, different ways, he communicates with us. But that was very, a great way for me to start inviting God into my business, is doing that daily. So that would be my advice for, bringing God into the business, is to join, the Kingdom Business Network on Clubhouse and tune in at 8 a.m. and start that prophetic journaling.
Absolutely. And as always, shout out to KBN, Kingdom Business Network. That's prophetic journaling. Another kind of offshoot of that, thinking about the spiritual disciplines, is solitude. So I don't know about you, Lillie Mae, a big thing that was kind of new for me in my devotion time was I would go on walks, and it's something about nature, trees and the sun beaming down. We were kind of shelter in place, right? Couldn't really go anywhere, but something about getting fresh air and hearing the birds chirp. And so solitude, because I think one of the things that's underlying in what you said, Lillie Mae, learning to trust the voice of God. So it's one thing to do it corporately with a group of people, and then it's another thing when you're by yourself, whether you're in your room, even if you're not on something like Kingdom Business Network and prophetic planning daily, even if you're just in your room or you're taking a walk. I think, Lillie Mae, sometimes we're uncomfortable being alone. But
very much.
Yeah. But
yes, I can speak for me for sure. 100% uncomfortable with that. And that's something that I actively work on. Like, you actually did an interview with Johanna, and I talked to Johanna last year, and me and Johanna had a call last year, and she was like, Lillie, it's one thing to seek God corporately, but it's another thing to seek him in your alone time. And she was like, imagine if you're dating someone and you only see them in a group setting, you never have one-on-one time with them. And I'm like, man, it was such a revelation. But it just, for some reason, just to go sit down and listen to worship music, at first it felt awkward or weird. So the solitude of the pandemic, coupled with learning to, have that one-on-one interaction with God outside of social media or outside of church, because we couldn't even go to church. That was really a change that I had to, actively work on, because I am a social person. I love community. Absolutely. I love people. I love interaction, even if it's social media. But, Johanna told me like, no, Lillie, you have to grow comfortable with that one-on-one time with him outside of all of those things. And nature walks was definitely my outlet during the pandemic. It still is, so you're 100% right. It can be uncomfortable, but it's very necessary. You don't want to rely on a community to connect with God. You want to be able to connect with him at any point in your day. And that's what that one-on-one time outside of those channels really helps to cultivate, for sure.
Absolutely. And folks, what we're not saying is not to be in community. I mean, the scripture tells us not to forsake the assembly, but I think about it, Lillie Mae, that scripture that says, enter his gates with thanksgiving, his courts with praise. So if I'm entering into community with people, I've already been intimate with him throughout the week, so that when I come into that gathering, that corporate setting, I'm entering with a posture of thanksgiving and praise already. And I think for some people pre-pandemic, they were used to the assembling part, but maybe the entering, I know I enter church differently now because we were just going virtual for a while, but now that physically being in church, it's like, man, I so much more of an appreciation, and I come in more hungry now. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what I hear you saying. And I'm not shocked Johanna's up here preaching and she's not even on this show. So I am not surprised that she dropped that wisdom. Mm-hmm. My goodness, Lillie Mae, what a conversation. So we talked about your professional background. We touched on your turning point in your faith journey. But Lillie Mae, let's get right into your area of expertise now. Let's PR, the Glam CEO. Talk to us about the work you do with clients and how you empower a lot of the women that you work with.
Sure. So I offer media campaigns and not just for women, I also offer that for men professionals as well, where I confirm them for different interview opportunities with online magazines and podcasts. And then I also offer marketing coaching to help people, tighten up their social media, be more strategic with their marketing efforts so that they can reach their income goals. So if any listeners need, marketing coaching, or you need some media support so that you can build your visibility and your digital footprint, definitely check me out at theglamceo.com. There are a ton of offers there. And I also have a Facebook summit coming up in August. And so with the Facebook Summit, I give women the opportunity to be speakers and promote their expertise inside of my Facebook group, which has about 1,400 members. So if anyone also needs that type of promotion or access to a large number of other entrepreneurs, I provide speaking opportunities as well.
Love it. And folks, as Lillie Mae is talking about the different things she's involved in, we will have these in the show notes on jerichoforce.com. So don't you worry. Don't you worry. Lillie Mae, with you being an expert in PR, social media, digital marketing, how have some of the trends changed? We've certainly seen the rise of platforms like Clubhouse. We've seen the rise of TikTok. Maybe more, I won't say a flattening of Instagram, but maybe Instagram being used in a way that maybe was different 3 or 4 years ago. So what did you see during the pandemic, and where do you see things kind of going as we come back to a new normal?
Yeah, I definitely saw social media become like an integral part of many people's business plan. I always encourage people to still have an offline marketing plan, depending on the nature of your business. Like, everyone is not on social media, but a lot of people are. And so now it's like an integral part of most people's business strategy, where, a few years ago, it wasn't. It was an alternative, like, I might get on there, I might not. But now, I've seen people on Clubhouse making, 5-figure months just from using Clubhouse, and same with social media like Instagram. So now, that is, and for many people, becomes a very integral part of your marketing strategy. I've seen that trend. And with the rise of Clubhouse, it showed you that, things are going to constantly be evolving in entrepreneurship in the world, period. And just like we kind of talked on earlier about that adaptability, it's important to be an early adapter, like adapt to things early. Like I had someone that was trying to get me on Clubhouse when it first came out. And I was like, I don't want to learn another social media platform. Right. They're like, no, Lillie, this is going to be the next big thing. By the time I got on there, the boom had already happened. And you can see the people who got on it early did very, very, very well, right? And so I was like, oh man, they were right. So, being willing to be one of those early adapters when something, comes out or you see a trend. But, there was a statistic recently, I forget the exact statistic, but it was something to the effect of that this year, I think there would be like 17 million new entrepreneurs. And so and this was like a third year consecutive statistic where every year since the pandemic, there's been a rise in entrepreneurship. So although that is grand, what that means is now we really have to be strategic if we want to have longevity, because there are going to be more people competing in the marketplace. So those are a couple of things that I've noticed here recently in the realm of entrepreneurship.
Some good stuff, Lillie Mae. One thing that I saw, Lillie Mae, when people go to your site, you've written a good number of ebooks, and different from maybe the coaching that you do. What are some things that people can learn from your books? Because, a book is kind of that staple. That's the forever thing. When you can't be in the room with Lillie Mae, the book speaks for her. So what are some of the big messages you try to get across to people in your books?
Sure. I basically kind of took myself as this prototype, and everything that I've done, I pretty much put it into a book. So like how to become a paid speaker. I am a paid speaker, so I teach people how to do that. And then there's how to make, $5,000, or actually it might be $10,000 in 1 month. That usually is like the sweet spot for entrepreneurs. Most people I coach, their goal is to make $10,000 in a month. So I have that book available, how to plan your tour. Doing the Glambitious tour, it was such an amazing thing that I did. I did that for a few years where I would, take my brand to different cities and connect with different women and influencers and even celebrities. And so I put a book together to show people how to do that, like to break it down and make it simple. That's the other thing about my books. I like to break it down and make it simple. I don't like to use a lot of words, a lot of fluff. Like there's no fluff in my books. It's just the meat of how to get it done. So those are a few of the topics I have. I have one probably about branding, becoming like a recognizable brand, and then monetizing your brand. So those are a few of the topics in my books.
So good, Lillie Mae. So good. Now, Lillie Mae, you've been involved with a lot of things. Just give us a little nugget about building a brand, because it's a B word we hear in business a lot, but there's so many misconceptions about a brand. So just give us just a nugget about when you hear the word brand, what should entrepreneurs who desire to build one, what is kind of the big overarching theme that they should think about when building a brand?
Sure. I would say quality and momentum. Everything. And if anyone follows me on Instagram, like even my personal page, I am Lillie Mae, right? You'll see that pretty much all the pictures I post are very high quality resolution. They're very colorful, and that's intentional because I know that everything that I'm attached to, I want it to have a quality appearance about it, whether it's a book cover, a flyer, a conference flyer. There have even been times, like if I'm participating in something else that someone's doing and their flyer isn't quite to where I would like the quality to be for me to post it, I may create like my own version of it because I'm so serious about the quality that is represented by my brand. And then anytime I do anything, I try to operate in excellence. So that quality piece is so important. Operating in excellence, showing up in excellence, having an excellent aesthetic, right? And then, like I said, the second piece, the branding, is momentum. That means people need to see you in many different facets of the expertise you offer. Like they need to see you interviewing on a podcast. They need to see you speaking at an event. They need to see you hosting your own webinar. Like all of these things contribute to your brand impression is the momentum. So people need to consistently see you as an expert in your industry, because what that does is create more opportunities. opportunities. Usually when someone sees that I'm hosting my own event, they invite me to speak at their event. Or if they see that I'm traveling, then they're like, well, maybe, if I hire her as a coach, I can figure out how to make money and travel, So I try to just be very intentional about the quality of what I put out related to my brand and consistency, which leads to that momentum, not having gaps of time when there's nothing that people see from Lillie Mae. I try to be consistent to keep that momentum going. Didn't mean to make that a long-winded answer.
No, that's good. QCM, quality, consistency, momentum, and momentum multiplies. Come on now, Lillie Mae, you get me excited. I love it. Well, Lillie Mae, we are halfway through 2022. I promise this year is just blown by. You mentioned, I believe it was a summit coming up, but what else? And I know that God is doing a lot in your life. So what are you excited about for as we look at the outlook of the rest of this year?
That's a great question. And typically I would have like a complete concrete answer for that. But here recently, I've really surrendered my agenda to God. So I've really surrendered my business and my agenda to God. So I'm in a space where I don't really 100% know, all of the surprises that he's going to present me with, but I'm believing him for some surprises in my business. And one thing I added to my business was doing like influencer collaboration. So I am looking forward to doing, more influencer collaborations because that's like a new facet of my business. But otherwise, I'm just kind of flowing with the pace of grace in this season. So we'll see. Like, I just encourage people to subscribe to my email list by visiting theglamceo.com and follow me on Instagram at I am Lillie Mae to see what's next for me.
I like that. She's already dropping the nuggets. Like, hey, this is how you can follow me and stay tuned. I like it, Lillie Mae, and being in a place of grace when it comes to planning. I think that's huge. And why I think listeners, if you're understanding what Lillie Mae is saying, not grinding, not being, I'm gonna make this big, huge plan and like nothing's going to change. Hopefully 2020, 2021 showed us anything is possible. But I love that you said that, Lillie Mae, moving at a pace of grace and just allowing the Holy Spirit to guide. Hey, if I'm should I collaborate with this person or not? Is now the time to launch something or not? Is now the time to, add board members or hire someone or, whatever that is, like you were talking about earlier, ways of just inviting God into the business conversation. So good. So good. Well, Lillie Mae, you already gave us all the social media, but just to reiterate, so it sounds like the center hub of everything is the glamceo.com. Any other specific platforms you want to point people to besides Instagram or?
Sure. You can follow the Glambitious Club on Clubhouse, Glambitious on Instagram and Facebook. I have a Glambitious Facebook group. So if you search Glambitious, all of my things will come up. YouTube, everything is Glambitious. So definitely connect on those platforms as well.
Awesome. Well, Lillie Mae, I have really enjoyed this conversation. I'm so glad you joined us here on the Jericho Force podcast. I know I have some big takeaways of what you said, but folks, I can tell you this much. Lillie Mae will return to the Jericho Force podcast. But thank you so much, Lillie Mae, for spending some time with us.
You are more than welcome. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, folks, we leave things here on the Jericho Force podcast. Don't conform to the world's way of doing business. Transform by doing business God's way. We'll see you next time on the Jericho Force podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Jericho Force podcast. You can catch us live on Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time and on demand. Check out jerichoforce.com/podcast for more details. To learn how to live out your faith in the marketplace, grab a copy of Jason Davis's book, Fortify, Being Rooted in God's Plan for Work and Business, available on Amazon.
You're listening to Jerry Roycelive Worldwide Podcast.